It's the highest it's been since 1982, and it is probably going to keep rising over the coming months. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Savvy Squaddie. In this video, I'm going to talk about inflation. What is it? Why does it happen? And what can you do in this time of record high inflation? Now, you might be thinking, why do I even need to know about inflation? Well, as it is such a key metric in the economy and affects so many different things, having an awareness and understanding of it will help better prepare you to make more informed decisions when it comes to your finances and way of living. Firstly then, what is inflation? Inflation is the decline in purchasing power of your money over time. For example, Joe's weekly food shop comes to £100 and he is able to get everything he needs for that. A year later, that same food shop is now £109.10. Joe now has to put a couple of items back as he only has £100. His money has lost purchasing power as he can no longer afford everything he could last year. Joe has experienced an annual inflation of 9.1%, which is, at the time of recording, the current inflation rate here in the UK, the highest in 40 years. I will cover some of the specific factors as to why it is currently so high later on in this video, but next I want to cover the main drivers of inflation. There are a number of them, but the three main causes of inflation are demand pull, cost push, and built in. Demand pull inflation happens when consumer demands for goods and services increases faster than the economy's capacity to produce those goods and services. Therefore, prices are increased in an attempt to lower the demand. The more expensive something is, the less people that can afford it. It's very similar to supply and demand in the stock market and how that controls the stock price. The more demand there is for something that has a limited supply, then the higher the price. A real-world example of this, which I'm very familiar with, are the price increases that Tesla are implementing to their cars due to not being able to keep up with the high demand they are experiencing. Their entry-level Model 3 was around £38,000 back in 2019, and now in 2022 it's close to £48,500, with a wait time of around 7 months. That's nearly a 28% increase in 3 years. People who bought the car a year ago can now sell it for more. It's not often that your car appreciates in value. I do also recognise that part of the increases are due to the rise in cost of materials, but this is not the main factor for their raised prices. However, it is a nice segue to the next cause, cost push inflation. This is where there is an increase in the price of raw materials needed to create the final products that we use. It costs companies more to purchase these supplies, and so they pass that cost on to consumers by increasing the price of the product they create and that we buy. When the supply of those raw materials decrease, the price of them increases. Again, like demand pull, it's a fine balance of the relationship between supply and demand that contributes to inflation. What we are currently experiencing with the fuel prices is cost push inflation. The demand for fuel has stayed the same, but due to a decrease in the supply of it, the price has gone up quite a bit. And because most of our utility bills also rely on oil as well, our gas and electric bills have increased substantially. Pretty much, demand pull inflation is driven by consumer demand, while cost push inflation is driven by supply costs. But either way, they both lead to higher prices for us. Finally, the third cause I will go through is built-in inflation, which can also be referred to as wage price spiral. We all like a pay rise, right? But where does that money come from? For most people, it comes from a company's profit. But if they start giving out pay rises, that starts eating into their profit, which in turn doesn't make the company look good as it is becoming less profitable, then investors won't invest as the company is not growing. So what they do is increase the price of their products to offset the pay rises. For us in the public sector, our wages are paid by the taxpayer, not profits. So when it comes to pay rises, where does that money come from? Either by increasing taxes, the government taking on more debt, or it comes out of the already allocated budget, which would then lead to cuts in overseas training, ranges, welfare, adventure training, etc. A lot of people are not happy with the recently announced 3.75% pay increase for the armed forces, because due to current inflation rates, it actually equates to a real terms pay cut of over 5%. Unfortunately, due to potential soon-to-be Prime Ministers promising to reduce taxes and the UK being in a lot of debt, in my opinion, we just were not going to see a pay rise in line with the current inflation rate. Frustrating, I know, but what are your thoughts on the pay rise? Let me know in the comments below. Back to explaining wage price spiral. When someone earns a pay rise, they have more disposable income to spend on stuff. This increases the demand for products and services, which then increases the prices. Now those prices are higher, people want a pay rise so they can continue to afford those products and services, which then leads to higher production costs, which in turn also increase prices, and so the spiral continues. Now, you might be thinking that pay increases are the cause of it all and we should just never have a pay rise again and inflation would be solved. But many economists agree that a small bit of inflation each year is a good thing, and this is because it shows that the economy is growing. Deflation, or whether prices are getting lower, although might sound nice, is actually more harmful for the economy. This is why many countries' central banks aim for around 2% inflation per year. Our economies are very much based on us spending money and not saving it in order for it to grow, and a growing economy is a good economy. So inflation in small doses can be a good thing. The problem occurs when it gets too high, like it is at the moment. So now we know what inflation is, a few broad causes of inflation, and that small doses of it are a good thing for the economy. But who controls inflation? How do they control it? And how does the current rate of 9.1% come to be? Well, most countries have a central bank, and it is this bank whose responsibility it is to control the annual rate of inflation. Here in the UK, it is called the Bank of England, and the main tool they use to try and control inflation are interest rates. You see, when interest rates are low, it is cheap and accessible for most to borrow money, so people have more money to spend on goods and services. This can then lead to inflation as there is more money in the economy than there are supplies to spend it on, or in other words, demand to pull inflation. Also, when interest rates are low, people tend not to save money as they aren't gaining much extra from the interest their bank is offering, so they spend it. The opposite is true when interest rates go up. It is more expensive for people to take out loans, and they are more inclined to save as rates are better. That then means that overall consumers will spend less money and so prices increase a lot slower, therefore lowering the rate of inflation. Or at least that's the theory behind it. This is why we have seen the Bank of England raise their base rate from 0.1% during the pandemic to now 1.25%. In the UK, the inflation rate is worked out using the CPI, or Consumer Price Index. Essentially, this is like an imaginary shopping basket full of goods and services that the majority of households buy, like food, energy, clothing, etc. The prices of all these items are collected from a wide variety of shops and added up to get an average for each item. All items are then added up again to get the total amount of the basket, and then that is compared to the previous year to see if it has increased or decreased. The Bank of England then uses that information to calculate inflation. So why is inflation at a 40-year high? A big reason why we are feeling the pinch now is due to the pandemic. When work from home and lockdowns were implemented, people were not out spending money. But equally due to lockdowns, many producers of goods and services had to close, so they were not producing anything. Fast forward to when we were all free again and people found they had quite a bit of disposable income due to not travelling for work or eating out, etc. The demand for everything went up, and because there was limited production during the pandemic, the supply wasn't there to meet the demand, so prices have gone up. This, along with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, has not helped. Ukraine's second biggest export are crops like wheat, barley and maize, which is in a hell of a lot of food. In 2019, 49% of the global sunflower oil supply came from Ukraine, so we are all feeling the effects of this war in many ways. Then there's also the crude oil supply issues that have made both energy and fuel prices go up considerably. Food, energy and fuel are the three main causes of the 9.1% inflation rate at the moment, and the Bank of England expects it to rise to 11% in the coming months. But what can you do to help out with your finances during these times? Firstly, if you aren't already, start budgeting your money. Your money is no longer able to buy what it could last year. If you try and keep up the same lifestyle, you will go into debt, and that should be avoided, especially with interest rates increasing. Having a budget is a great way to hold you accountable for the money you spend and helps keep costs under control. When you create a budget, you will see exactly where your money is going, and you will be able to easily stop spending on stuff you don't actually need. You should not be going into debt to maintain a lifestyle you cannot afford. I will be making a video in the near future showing you how to budget your money, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss that. The next thing you can do is to try and pay down any debt you might have that is at a variable interest rate. As we've discussed, when inflation is high, interest rates are raised to try and combat it. If you have any loans that the interest rate is not fixed, then you will definitely feel the effect by the increasing rate. You'll end up paying much more in interest on these loans, so try and get them down as quick as possible. If you have consumer debt, you should not be investing, as you are losing more money to the interest you are paying on that debt than you would gain from investing. I've made a video on debt and loans which you should check out to learn how damaging it can actually be. Having some savings during this time is still a must-have. It may be losing out to inflation, but you need a rainy day fund should something happen. If your washing machine broke tomorrow, could you afford a new one without going into debt or doing monthly payments? Having some savings put aside at all times to cover unexpected large expenses, even in times of high inflation, is important and relieves a lot of stress should something happen, as you know you can cover the costs. In the long term, investing beats out inflation, and it is much better to invest your money than to save it if you don't need it in the next 5 years. Once you've squared away variable debt and a rainy day fund, you can then look at investing some of your money into the stock or bond market, making sure to diversify and not putting all your eggs in one basket. This will help beat out inflation in the long term. I've created a video on investing for beginners which I will link below, along with some other videos to help out. If this cost of living crisis has not opened your eyes to the importance of personal finance, managing your money, and just living within your means, then you are going to seriously struggle in the future. Personal finance is personal, meaning it is your responsibility to manage your money correctly and sensibly. Inflation is affecting everyone at the moment. We are all feeling the pinch, and it is only going to get worse in the coming months. I hope that this video has improved your understanding of inflation and set out some ways to best navigate the situation and prepare yourself for the future. Are you ready for the upcoming energy price increases in October? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you just saw, please hit the subscribe button up there, and if you want to see some more videos, click over there. See you soon.